Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. It is a lovely Saturday afternoon as Inter Miami has signed Palmeiras center back Micael, and I hope I'm spelling or pronouncing his name right. But it is a big, tall, talented center back, I think, from Palmeiras, who spent 2025 with Palmeiras, and then the 2 years prior to that, 2.5 years prior to that, with the Houston Dynamo, where he was really good in the MLS. And it now appears Inter Miami has confirmed a loan deal for the 2026 season with Palmeiras to bring him in, and there will be a purchase option at the end. I'm your host, Scotty. Today, I will be joined by you guys in the chat. Ask any questions you want, and I will do my best to answer it. But I love this signing, and I was too excited to wait for Soar, who won't be available for the next couple days. So I figured I would just go live and talk about Inter Miami's brand new center back, who, again, I think this is an equally exciting signing to what Inter Miami got with the goalkeeper, Dane St. Clair, a couple weeks ago. And so, kudos to this front office for pulling this off. I have lots of things to say about this 25-year-old center back, and I'm excited to talk about him, but I do want to get into the chat. So if you have any questions, we'll let it rip. I want to start with this. I don't cover the Houston Dynamo, obviously. I don't pay that much attention to the Western Conference unless there's a direct rival for Inter Miami. But I will say I have thoughts on Mikael, but I want to wait until I want to do this first. Andrew Wiebe, who is one of the hosts of MLS, is MLS's broadcasts, and he does a lot of the sort of whip around stuff and covers the entire league. This is what he had to say about Mikael just 45 minutes ago. He tweets out that Mikael is an elite recovery defender and great with one-on-one defensive ability, giving Miami even more license to push numbers forward and play a high line. He's also wildly underrated as a passer and is naturally left-footed, so he's basically a unicorn. And that a lot of people really hyped up Ache and Goalkeeper on that 2024 Houston Dynamo run. If you guys remember, made the playoffs and won the U.S. Open Cup and had a nice, solid 2-year run. That there was a lot of hype for Ache in those tiki-taka seasons, but Micael was actually the best player on that team, and he single-handedly changes the risk-reward calculation for a team that wants the ball. He's basically a perfect signing for Inter Miami. I don't know what else. I think that just captured it so perfectly. What I will say from my own personal perspective, we played the Houston Dynamo early this season. They sold Micael sort of right as the season was getting going. And so even though Inter Miami played Houston week 2, I think, in the MLS, they had just sold him a week before. And so a lot of our preparation for the pregame show and for that episode was trying to figure out how Houston was going to make up for this loss of this huge defender. And Houston never really did. In 2024, the Houston Dynamo had the third best defense in the MLS. They allowed 39 goals, and maybe we didn't talk about it a ton because they were a Western Conference team and they never really were in Inter Miami's path back then. But we talked a lot about how great Charlotte's defense was that year, and that's how good Houston was. 2025, they sell Micael at the beginning of the season. Don't really replace him, to be fair. They also move on Goalkeeper and Ache at the end of 2024, and so the midfield's also not as good, but their defense really fell off a cliff. They went from being a locked-in playoff team, I think they finished 5th in the Western Conference in 2024, to missing the playoffs, having a bottom 10 defense, and having everything really fall apart. So I don't want to put that all on Micael, who, again, other people have said was their best player. They lost a bunch of talent, but clearly he was the biggest piece, and they never really replaced him. So just to give a little bit of a bio, he's 6'3". So Inter Miami has played a lot of games with smaller center backs going back a long time. Even Kamal Miller was 5'11", and obviously this year with Noah Allen, who's maybe 5'7", 5'8", and Maxi Falcone, who's also under 6 foot. They have not had a big, powerful center back in several years. maybe Nico Frede, but even he is not as big as Micael. So you get the big center back. You get him as a left footer who can play on that left side. I will just say, just looking at some of his season with Palmeiras, he also played a little bit on the right side. And so I think there's some versatility here. Underrated passer. And most importantly, this is a guy that's proven it in this league. He's only 25 years old. He's sort of getting to the peak of his power. So he'll turn 26 in August. And Inter Miami gets him in on loan. So with a purchase option. So they will be able to purchase him if it becomes, like, if he's a star, they can buy him. And for those that maybe I haven't mentioned it yet, Palmeiras bought him for about $4.5 million last year from Houston. So you would imagine if they're trying to dump him off, like, the purchase option will be at a level where Inter Miami would not have to make him a DP in order to buy him permanently. But we'll obviously see how he plays this year, and we'll have those discussions in the second half of the season. SPH says back three of Noah Allen, Maxi Falcone, and Micael. I will also say Alex Winley, who, great reporter, and we've had her on the channel, has talked about how Inter Miami's looking to add another defensive starter caliber player to this roster. So I don't think they're done here at all. And we'll talk about how that affects some of the guys on the roster later on in this episode. But I don't know if this means they're going to a back three. And Kareem says, why would we play a back three? I still think Inter Miami is going to go with a back four, and we'll have questions about who plays in the midfield, who plays up top. But this is now a tremendous amount of depth. If Maxi Falcone stays on the roster, which I expect him to, you're talking about having, and Noah Allen stays on the roster, which I expect him to, you're talking about having three guys that are good enough to win you the MLS Cup already, and potentially a fourth. I think you feel great about right back with Ian Frey and Facundo Mura. Ian Frey also a guy that can play some center back if you need him to. And then at left back, you have Noah Allen as a guy that can play there and be serviceable, and then you'll bring in Sergio Reguilon. So this back line is looking tremendous. And then you talk about the goalkeeping situation where you have Dane St. Clair, who was the best goalkeeper in the MLS last year, joining Inter Miami. And you have Rocco Rios Novo in case something goes wrong. This has really been an impressive offseason so far for Inter Miami when it comes to filling out the back line. You know, last season, Ian Frey, we saw him miss time in the playoffs, and we saw Cello have some bad stretches. I think the right back situation is going to be better in 2026, which is, I apologize if I say 2025, referring to the upcoming season. It's obviously just past New Year's, so still getting used to it. The center back situation, I think, looks great, and I think they might add another piece. And then you add left back, Sergio Reguilon. Obviously, he's not going to be as good as Jordi Alba, but defensively, you might keep what you've gotten, and you've improved the goalkeeping situation. So I think this is a fantastic signing with Mikael and a fantastic start to the offseason, especially in the back half of your team. Cynical says, let's go. Happy New Year, Scotty. Happy New Year to everyone. It is the 3rd of January, and we have not gone live in quite some time. So fun to get back on here. And I think we'll have plenty of episodes over the next 2 weeks with new signings. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Kareem says, I just hope he's better than Nico Frede and David Martinez. Like I said, guys, this is a player that proved in the MLS, in this league, that he is of a high quality and is able to handle himself and kind of fits the profile of everything Inter Miami could want in a center back. He is from Brazil, so I would imagine there's not a ton of Spanish. Like I don't know if he speaks Spanish, but that Houston Dynamo team had a lot of Spanish influence, and so I'm sure in terms of a soccer sense, he's comfortable playing on the field and communicating with anyone in Spanish, so I don't think there's going to be any concern there. Other details, he will take up an international roster slot. This is something that we've heard this offseason, that Inter Miami is not really trying to have as many international players as last season, and that's why you might see the team go with Rocco and Dane St. Clair in the goalkeeping situation, because neither of them needs an international roster slot. It's why they took so many guys in the super draft, hoping one or two of them who won't take up international roster slots can provide depth pieces. So Mikael, not one of those players. He is going to take up an international roster slot. something to keep in mind. But again, if this guy's you're going to be your number one center back, I think this, it's totally worth it. Kareem says, I get the vibe he's a bigger, more experienced Noah Allen. I don't think these are going to be particularly similar players. And again, I want to talk about Noah Allen and Maxi Falcone in a few minutes. But no, I think he's going to be big, strong, physical center back that's pretty athletic. I think, if anything, he's going to be more what you would hope Toto Aviles could have become, but even bigger. Good in one-on-one defending and can be rangy, but probably even a better passer. So, I think this is a tremendous signing because he's already proven that he's a good MLS player, and also I think he's probably become better with his time in Brazil. Speaking of which, they signed him. Palmeiras signed him for about $4.5 million last February. He played 28 games with Palmeiras, 2,376 minutes. It was mostly at the beginning of the season when they signed him. They put him pretty much straight into the starting 11, gave him an opportunity to settle in. And then as the season went along, he sort of lost time and lost his spot on the depth chart. And so by the end of the season, it was, and even really by the middle, it was clear he was a rotation piece. And by the end, it felt like Inter Miami is not, Palmeiras is not super invested in his future. And so looking to move him on, Inter Miami found the opportunity, and I thought was very opportunistic to get this deal done. Certainly, the Houston Dynamo could have tried to make this happen, and that would have been a big deal for them. But for Inter Miami to swoop in and get this player, I think is a huge deal. Like I said, 2,376 minutes. So that's a full season. It's not like he played 400 minutes and was benched. He played 107 minutes at the Club World Cup. Although I will say by that point, he had already sort of lost his starting job. If you guys remember, going into that Club World Cup against Palmeiras, Inter Miami played, and they had a center back, Murillo Sequeira, who got injured on the play that Tadeo Allende scored early in that first half. He leaves the game, not replaced by Micael, but later on in the tournament, in the round of 16, Gomez, who's their captain at center back, the Paraguayan, who we talked a lot about back then, he got a red card in the Botafogo game and not only missed that game, but then was suspended for the quarterfinals. Mikael replaced him as a right-sided center back next to Fuchs. So he played on the right side in the Club World Cup, handful of minutes to close out that game against Botafogo, and then he started the game against Chelsea. And obviously, they lost that game as Chelsea went on. So high-level experience, I guess, is my point there. Played in the Club World Cup against Chelsea. He had 4 games in the CONCACAF Champions Cup with Houston. Played in 7 games in the Leagues Cup, and then obviously has close to 60 games in the MLS. So this is a guy that has done all the things Inter Miami could possibly want. He's played in all the big stages, played against Liga MX teams, played against super high-level teams like Chelsea, and then obviously in Brazil, which I have a lot of respect for that league. Any game he played there was going to be great experience for him. So however good he was at 24 years old in the MLS, I think he's probably a better player now at 25, having had that year of development at, possibly the biggest or one of the 2 or 3 biggest clubs in the entire Western Hemisphere. I think he'll be an even better player, and especially if the confidence can come back quickly, I think Inter Miami might have gotten a gem here. I really do. Mr. Maney says, Scotty, Happy New Year. Any news about the third DP? We never talked about it on the show. There was some rumors about Giovanni Lo Celso. Seems like those have cooled off a little bit. And so I think right now it's wait and see. Our thinking before that was that Inter Miami will look for a third DP in this window that they feel is good enough and worthy of that spot, but that they might end up having to wait until the summer to really find a player that's of that quality. Kareem says this is half our business done and only 2 days into the year. And then Mr. Manny says, what happened to the rumors of Mura and Sergio Reguilon? Here's what I'll say, guys. Well, first of all, Reguilon did officially sign. Inter Miami is set to come back to training in the next 10 days. I believe it's the 11th, January 11th, where they come in to be weighed and do their medical, their physical, and sort of set themselves up for the season. That is when I would expect these guys to all be signed by. And so, for example, Dane St. Clair hasn't signed officially. Facundo Moura, I don't think is signed officially. At least Inter Miami hasn't announced it. Doesn't concern me at all. I think if they're not in by January 11th, having been officially announced, I think that's when you can start to be curious about it. But for right now, they're on vacation. And, you know, for example, for Dane St. Clair, he's supposed to get a certain number of vacation days in the offseason mandated by the MLS Players Association. So the fact that he hasn't come to Miami yet, the fact that he is sort of not signed and done his medical and all that stuff, it doesn't surprise me at all. It doesn't bother me at all. I think the 11th is the day that I would expect all of that to be done by. So whenever he feels like he's done his vacation and he's ready to get to Miami and get to work, we'll hear it. It could be Monday morning. It could be the following week, like I said, when everyone has to report for medicals. And then I think the first day of preseason training is the 13th. So, you know, it's right around the corner, and this was a really short offseason, if I'm being totally honest. Kareem says the defense is almost set. I get the feeling Abdel Talabi will be a star and get into the squad as well. Abdel Talabi is the guy that, and I think they call him Del Talabi, is the guy that they drafted in the Super Draft at the end of the first round. And it will be very interesting to see what he can bring when they get to training. EMZ says, is he Brazilian? He is from Brazil. He spent 2.5 years in the MLS, the first half of the year, mostly with the Houston Dynamo's MLS Next Pro team. And then over the next 2 years, he developed into one of the best center backs in the league and then got a big move to Palmeiras. What usually happens is that the longer guys stay in the league, the more easier it becomes for them to get eligible for a green card. I think the sort of standard is 3 years, but it's a moving target depending on the player and the situation. So for him, I don't know if that resets or if that means he might be a player that can get a green card a year from now and then would no longer count as an international roster slot. But for now, he will take up an international roster slot. Octi says both Latin Romance languages, almost no issue communicating for football. Argentina and Brazil are neighbors. Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any problem. And again, that Houston Dynamo team he was a part of had plenty of Spanish influence. Carrasquilla and Ache. There's plenty of guys that would have been communicating in Spanish, either in training or on the field. So I think he'll fit in fine. EMC says, does that mean Noah Allen is benched? I think it does. And let me just make sure there's nothing else I really wanted to get to before we get to how it affects everyone else. 80 games with the Dynamo, 7 Leagues Cup games, some CONCACAF Champions Cup games. Okay, let's talk about how this affects everyone else. Inter Miami obviously finished the season with a clear pair as their starting center back in Noah Allen on the left and Maxi Falcone on the right. I thought both played really well down the stretch, especially Maxi Falcone, took his game to a new level in the last 2 months. Noah Allen, I think throughout the season was maybe their most consistent performer, if you take the whole season into account. So both of those guys earned their right to start, and obviously were good enough to win the MLS Cup. I think they've already improved their goalkeeping situation, and defensively, I think they might be more sound at the fullback spots and also through the middle. When you take Sergio Busquets out of the midfield and you're going to replace him with a Yannick Bright or potentially a new signing, I think they will get better throughout the whole team defensively. You didn't necessarily need to upgrade on Noah Allen and Maxi Falcone, but I think if you have the opportunity, you can and should, and I think this is what Inter Miami's found without really breaking the bank to do it or limiting themselves in other spots across the field. So, yeah, I think this does mean Noah Allen is going to see a minutes reduction. That said, if you think about last year, Gonzalo Lujan had plenty of minutes that I think can be dispersed to other players. Toto Aviles, especially early in the season, had some minutes that could be dispersed to other players. So I think right now you're looking at Inter Miami going with a 3-man center back rotation of Micael, Noah Allen, and Maxi Falcone to start the season. Maybe a 4th center back or a 4th defender, like I said, that's something Inter Miami is interested in doing this January. They have always had trouble closing the deal on quality center backs, really the entire Messi era, as they donate so many resources to other spots of the field. So I don't want to say they're guaranteed to get another center back, but it's at least something they're going to pursue. I think there's a chance that those four would be in a rotation for those two starting center back spots. And then I think there's a chance the super draft pick, first round super draft pick, Del Talabi, becomes the Ryan Saylor fifth center back. He is 24 years old. I think he's going to be pretty well developed as far as his physical maturity, and then getting him into a professional environment, I think that could really skyrocket what he's able to do. So, and then also you think about the young kids like Tyler Hall as a guy that might be ready to get some minutes next year. So that certainly leaves minutes for Maxi Falcone and Noah Allen. I don't think it leaves a lot of minutes for Gonzalo Lujan, and I don't think it leaves a lot of minutes for Toto Aviles. We have talked about Toto Aviles as a guy that might not be on this roster come the start of the season. He does take up a U22 DP spot, and I think that's something Inter Miami would love to be able to use on other players, and there have been some rumors about guys they've been interested in. I also think this is going to affect Gonzalo Lujan, who was Javier Mascherano's guy. He's a guy that has been Mascherano's guy long before he came to Inter Miami, really took him to the Olympics and some of the Argentine youth camps that maybe a lot of people in Argentina didn't necessarily feel like he belonged at based on his play with San Lorenzo. I don't know. Like, I thought his performances this year were really poor, and he's making a lot of money. I believe his salary last year was $800,000, and he had an extra bit on top of that because you had to pay off the transfer fee. Plus, you had to pay for an international roster slot. So you're talking about a guy that really cost you about $1.25 million in cap charge and wasn't particularly good, and certainly wasn't starter caliber, and certainly by the time you got to the end of the season had proven you couldn't start him. So I think Inter Miami has to try and get him off the roster. Does that mean he gets a loan back down to Argentina? Like, that's what I would guess, and Inter Miami eats some of the salary, but if he's off the roster, it won't affect their salary cap situation. And I think this move makes that more likely. I think Toto Aviles is probably gone for sure. And so if you take Aviles off the roster, and I think if you bring in another center back, it means Gonzalo Lujan's going to be gone. You're talking about quality starting options in Noah Allen, Maxi Falcone, and Micael, who I think all have the potential to take a step up in their game. Falcone was excellent in the last 2 months of the season, and throughout the year that he had some really nice performances, especially in big games. But if you can give me the last 2 months of Maxi Falcone for the entire 2026 season, that is an improvement. That is a step up. And maybe that was about him getting comfortable in the MLS or him getting comfortable in the US or whatever it was. Like, if he really settled in and what we got at the end is what we're going to get from him moving forward, I think that's an improvement on what we got from him in 2025. Noah Allen, still a young player, I think has a really interesting, unique center back skill set that will have moments where it is the right thing to put on the field. He will have plenty of opportunities if the roster stays as we're projecting. And I think there's room for him to take a step up as well, especially with his game in possession, because he's better than what I think he showed in possession over the last couple months of the season. And then, you remember he had that injury right around the Club World Cup, or actually in the Club World Cup, and he missed a couple weeks. And I don't know if he was ever 100% after that. And so if you get more of what he was at the beginning of the season, you get that for the entire 2026 season. I think that's an upgrade. And then when we talk about Mikael, who is the point of all this, like, that is a 6'3", left-sided, physical center back who's going to help you in the box. He's going to help you on set pieces. Has a goal or two in him over the course of the last couple of years. So maybe he's a guy that can get you a goal or two next season if you got a lot of set piece opportunities and you're putting a lot of balls into the box, which we know Inter Miami is going to be a front foot team and it's going to try and create a lot of offense. There might be some opportunities there. Underrated passer, and I think there's a chance he becomes one of the best defenders in the MLS. I really think that's out there for him. And even if it doesn't work, you still have your reliable guys to fall back on. So I love this. I love this signing. I really don't know how anyone could be negative about it, and like I think it's going to fit well into the roster. I will also mention, I'm debating whether I should mention this or not. I'll just say it, but don't. This is not me reporting on it. This is me just hearing some things and maybe seeing some things that make me think this might be true. Not reporting on it. I want to be clear. I'm not confirming this, but I believe one of the reasons that Palmeiras really liked him is because the salary was going to be not that high. We're talking about less than $500,000 a year, $400,000 a year. And if he is coming on loan from Palmeiras and he's going to be under that same contract, you are talking about a pretty low salary considering what he could potentially be worth in terms of his impact. So I think he's going to fit well into the roster from a salary cap charge perspective. And even if you throw on having to buy an international roster slot on top of that, like I think it's still a pretty attractive deal, and he's making much less than what a Gonzalo Lujan is making. So, like I think it's like an A+ deal all the way around. And even if it doesn't work, it doesn't crucify you. You still have good options, and if it does work, it could be really special. And this could be like I think there's a chance he becomes the best defender Inter Miami's ever had. I'll just put it that way. Okay. Kareem says, I can't give my opinion on his ability, but this is the first sign we've signed an MLS-proven center back in the Messi era. That is true. We got Kamal Miller before Messi. He says, usually we find a random South American with no MLS experience. Random Argentine, to be more specific. SPH says he's only valued at $800,000 or something. Is he good? No. In fact, I looked at his transfer market value, and it says $4 million. But he was signed by Palmeiras a year ago for $4.5 million. So, no, like I think he is. I think he's very good. EMZ says, any other updates on the keeper situation? Yes, they signed Dane St. Clair, and they're going to re-sign Rocco Rios Novo to be the backup. And I don't know if you could have a more like a better dream scenario. I'm a little surprised they're bringing back Rocco. From Rocco's perspective, because I think he earned the opportunity to go be an MLS starting goalkeeper. But if he was happy with what happened this year, which I don't think he'll get the same opportunities as he got last year, if I'm being honest. Like Dane St. Clair is going to be the guy. So it would be surprising to me if he got a lot of game time. But now Inter Miami is going to own his rights, and maybe it's better for him. I think he's been owned by Lanús for quite some time and then constantly coming back on loan to the U.S., whether it was to Atlanta United or to the Phoenix Rising or this past year to Inter Miami. So maybe it's easier for him to just be centrally located in the U.S. and figure out his career from there. So, I mean, I love it. And then Dane St. Clair, I think, is going to be a star. Pepto says Brazilians don't rate this guy. Yeah, listen, he went to Brazil. And maybe we should have focused more on this. He was not a big-time prospect. He was not. He was 21 years old, which is pretty old. Not really breaking through at, I want to say Atlético Mineiro. And Houston kind of just scouted him and took a chance on him and brought him in for their B team. And he came in 2022 as part of their B team as a guy who was 6'3" and left-footed and had a lot of the tools that you might like, but wasn't really fully formed. And Houston did a tremendous job turning him into like a professional starting center back. And then you throw in the fact that he has all the tools, and he became a really good player in the MLS. Good enough to get bought by Palmeiras, who was really trying to bolster their roster last year ahead of the Club World Cup. But then he went to Palmeiras and he didn't make it. What I will say is we saw Matias Rojas go to Corinthians in the Brazilian league a couple of years ago and then didn't really make it, and he came to Inter Miami and he was great. So I think the level in Brazil is much higher than the MLS, if I'm being honest. And so a player not making it there, I think is good for their development. Like I think in training and through game time, they are going to get a level up, just like I think they would if they went and played a year in France or something like that. And then, like, he goes from that back to a league he's already proven he's good enough for. I don't think there's many, like, I think the risk is really low, and it's all about mentally. If, who knows how much of Houston just got him in the right mental headspace to help him prepare, and that's why he was good in Houston. And then when you took him out of that, he went to Palmeiras, and he just wasn't able to replicate that. Like, you never know with athletes, but like, I think this is a pretty safe bet, even if he wasn't a standout in Brazil. And again, Palmeiras, I think they lost the Copa Libertadores, but you're talking about one of the best teams in Brazil. You take him to the 6th best team in Brazil, and he might be a locked-in starter, so who knows? Mr. Mania says, Allende, is he staying? I don't think so. Vice says, I think he does not take an international roster slot. He did for Houston in 2024. Maybe he got a green card in the offseason of 2024. That's not something we have public access to, so we'll see. But he did take up an international roster slot for Houston when he was last in the MLS. Pepto says, what happened to the Busquets replacement? Was supposed to be a done deal. Also desperately need wingers. I think Rodrigo de Paul is the Busquets replacement that they were talking about. I think they were talking about Sergio Reguilon and Rodrigo de Paul. Ani says, Ani says, Allen and Frey are my favorites. They should start at least 25 of possible 50 to 53 games we're going to play. I think they're going to play a lot. Listen, these two guys obviously have a big place in Inter Miami fans' hearts because they came from the academy, but they also proved that they were good. And Ian Frey has had plenty of players challenge him for the right back spot, and he's kind of won out. And whenever he's been healthy, he's been a guy you want on the field. And Noah Allen has just gotten better and better every year. And I think there's clearly a role for Noah Allen, regardless of who they bring in this year. And again, Noah Allen is also a guy that I don't think is going anywhere for the next 6 months. But if he has a good spring and, I do think he's a guy that could make the move to Europe at some point over the next couple transfer windows. Not this winter, but like even by the summer, if a team comes in and really wants him, like I think that's a conversation that will be had. Kareem says, so far, all of our signings have been upgrades except for Reguilon and except for the Jordi Alba Reguilon change. And Reguilon is still a Premier League left back. Here's what I'll say. The front office that is currently doing what they're doing was sort of reshaped just over a year ago. And we heard about Raul Sanyehi, but before that, before last winter, the brain trust of transfers was Chris Henderson and Tata Martino. They were responsible, and their teams were responsible for bringing talent into Inter Miami, and they both left at the same time. And the guys that came in did not have a lot of experience, period, and they didn't have a lot of experience at all. They had no experience in the MLS or in America or in even the Western Hemisphere. Like, it was a very raw team with very little experience in these markets. And you don't, like, I don't think they get great grades for what they did last winter. Although I think a lot of those guys finished on a high note, so maybe they do if we went back and looked at it. That said, they've had a whole year to sort of readjust and learn and grow. And so the fact that they're better this year, I think, is a tremendous sign. And I do think they've been better. Probably we said that last year, but from what they've done so far, like, I think they've made some really, really nice signings. And I agree with you. I think they have been mostly upgrades, and they've gotten less reliant on international roster slots, and they've made the team better. So we'll see. They still have a DP slot to work with, and obviously they need to get a couple more pieces. I think another center back is going to be something they're looking at. I think they're going to have to get a midfielder or two, and then I think they're going to need a forward or two, and whether that's, a guy that just replaces Fafo Picault and Tadeo Allende, or if that's getting a huge number 9 DP or something like that, we'll have to wait and find out. But they still need to make 5 or 6 signings this offseason, and then they're going to have guys leave. They're going to have to clear some U22 spots, and like I think there's a lot of work to do, but it has been exciting so far. And we heard Jorge Mas, some of the things he said and tweeted after the MLS Cup final, that they are hungry to get even better. And so if you combine the ambition that they clearly have with more experience, better understanding of the market, better understanding of the MLS and what the talent level is here. And I think also what we're seeing is a little bit less reliant on the Argentine league and Argentine players. It opens up a lot of opportunities to go be opportunistic and get great players. And I think that's exactly what they did with Micael here, a guy who's proven in the MLS, he can be a good player and has a lot of tools and is also prime age, right? He just turned 25 in August. Like he's entering his prime as a defender, and Inter Miami might be the huge beneficiaries of that. So like it could be really awesome. But we'll see what they do from here. EMC says all the new signings and rumors mean Allen and Frey are going to be benched, possibly Bright too. Listen, I think Yannick Bright got boxed out of an opportunity to start last year because they weren't going to start him over Sergio Busquets or Rodrigo de Paul. Like both de Paul and Busquets were going to start every game. And in a 2 midfield set, that meant there was no room for Yannick Bright. I don't think they're going to bring in a player that is like that this summer or this winter. And so I think that means that all 3 of Noah Allen, Ian Frey, and Yannick Bright are going to be able to compete for starting spots. And if you go by history, they might just win all 3 of those and play a lot of minutes. So I wouldn't be too worried if I were anyone right now about those 3 guys. I think they're going to get plenty of minutes this year. Pepto says need at least 2 more wingers and midfielders and 1 more tall physical center back with ball skills and DP level striker. I think if they got all that, you would be like it. You know, that's the dream right there. 2 wingers, 2 midfielders, 1 more defensive player, especially one that's a different profile to Maxi Falcao, Noah Allen, and more similar to Mikael would be awesome. And then that DP level striker it's going to be the dream until something else happens, but we'll see. Annie says, do we really need Moura? Like we can get this Brazilian and Allen and Frey can rotate the right back position. I don't think Noah Allen can play right back. What I will say is I'll be interested to see what happens with Israel Boatwright and Tyler Hall, who I do think can be a right back option. Maybe not ready to be a starter level, but as like a depth piece. And so I do think they needed to get another right back. Yeah. Justin says, and we mentioned this, Alex Windley saying they're not done looking at center back position. I think they're going to continue looking, but I will just remind everyone, we have said they need 2 center backs pretty much every winter since Messi got here, and they've only ever gotten 1, and it's always been a little bit of a struggle. That said, this feels like it's the earliest and most plan A center back option they've ever gotten since Messi arrived. So if you get him through the door, now you have time to go look for a second one. But I don't want to say they are for sure going to get a second one because I think they can live with the options they have right now. In fact, I think they can feel pretty good about the options they have right now, and so they shouldn't get someone just to get someone. But I do think they're going to look to continue to sign another player. Jake says, good signing. He's fast, left-footed, and 6'3", which, by the way, is my favorite profile of player. A left-footed center back with size and speed is the dream. Ash says, does this player fit the style of football that we want to play? It will be very interesting to see. It'll be very interesting to see what Inter Miami looks like next year. I can't imagine it'll be too different from what we saw at the beginning of 2025 if they keep Luis Suarez as their locked-in striker. But we'll see. I think there's a lot of time before any of that happens. Kareem says 1 of, if not both, of Toto and Lujan will be leaving, so we definitely need to still be looking at center backs. Yeah, I think with these 3, Mikael, Noah Allen, and Maxi Falcone, and then you throw in Ian Frey, who can play at center back. You throw in the super draft pick, Talabi, who can play center back. You throw in Tyler Hall as a guy that can potentially play center back or give you some minutes there. Like, I think they have enough players to fill the minutes. And so it's about quality at this point. And so if you can't find the right deal for a player at the right price that is an improvement, these things can fall apart. But I think they're going to look for another one. And also they could keep Lujan. Yeah, like it's at least possible. And again, Javier Mascherano really likes him. What about Allende? Is there any news, says Fies? No news. What I will say is I don't think we're going to hear anything about Tadeo Allende for Inter Miami until the end of the month. Celta has Tadeo Allende under contract. They're going to want to move him on this January, and I think they're asking for a price that they're not going to get. And so once you get towards the end of the month and they're in the final days of the window, they're going to be a little more desperate to move him on, and that might be when things happen. I will also say, I think the only way Allende comes back to Inter Miami is if Allende is completely committed to coming back to Inter Miami. And if he wants to go to River Plate, like he'll go to River Plate. They'll be able to offer more than Inter Miami can. So, like, I think it is reliant on Tadeo Allende wanting to be back here. Bepto says we'll have Rocco as the starting goalkeeper. Be serious. No, I think Dane St. Clair is going to be a top tier goalkeeper in this league. Oh no, he says no serious team will have Rocco as their starting goalkeeper. Again, I think Rocco deserves a little bit more credit. A. B, I think there's a lot of MLS teams that I wouldn't describe as particularly serious. And C, like, I think Rocco has deserved an opportunity. Like, he's earned an opportunity. But I don't think it'll be at Inter Miami. Kareem says not just Argentines. We got the Paraguayan David Martinez and the actual decent center back in Maxi Falcon. David Martinez is Argentine. He had like a family connection to Paraguay, and so he was able to represent Paraguay's national team, but he's from Argentina. Some people fighting about Rocco in the chat. EMZ says the Brazilian league is more intense than the MLS. Yeah, no, I have talked about the Argentine league and MLS not being comparable. Like, I do think the MLS is better than the Argentine league, and I don't even think it's that close outside of the top, 6, 7, 8 teams. But the Brazilian league, I think, top to bottom, is probably better than the MLS. Like, I do think almost every team in the top flight of the Brazilian league would be a top-tier MLS team, if not runaway favorites. Kevin says, I heard James is coming to Inter Miami or Columbus. Not sure who James is. Ani says, by the way, will Kramaski ever come back? We'll see. I think he's doing good in Parma. But, similar to this Micael, like, that's a player that I think if he comes back, he will be much better for the experience that he had in Italy. Some people asking about Baltasar. I think it's tough with Baltasar, man. They I don't think they want to make him a U22 DP. And so you need to get him at a certain price point that he won't be a U22 DP. And I'm not sure Racing wants to let him go for that price, and I'm not sure. Like, I think Inter Miami would like him back if they could make it work. And we'll see if they can. But for now, I think that's maybe a wait till the end of the offseason type of thing, just like it was last year. Jay says there's reports Miami's looking at U.S.-born Mako Miljevic, who plays for Huracan in Argentina. He's a midfielder. I wouldn't want this player, if I'm being honest with you. I don't think he's particularly good. I think he's more expensive than he's worth. He's a MLS caliber player. I want to be clear, But like I think he's kind of a poor man's Telasco Segovia, and if you have to pay a transfer fee for him, he's going to end up taking up a huge spot on your wage bill. He is Argentine American, so he wouldn't take up an international roster slot, and that is something Inter Miami's really focused on this offseason. But like I think he would be like a backup number 10 type player, and he's not particularly athletic either. So I think if you have to pay a transfer fee, I wouldn't be that interested in it. But again, it's all about the price. Kevin says James Rodriguez, the Colombian. I think there's zero chance that Inter Miami goes after him. I don't think any MLS club is going to go after him, if I'm being honest. But I certainly don't think Inter Miami will. Thomas says keep an eye on Moises Paniagua. He's super talented from Bolivia. Man, I would love this kid. I don't want to make this about him because this is about Micael, who I think is a super exciting signing in and of himself. But this kid from Bolivia, Paniagua, totally fluffed that. Super talented winger, very athletic. Like I think he could replace Tadeo Allende pretty well. And if you're talking about using a U22 spot on a player, I think this is like really the type of player to go for. That said, Inter Miami has all their U22 players spots filled right now. So you'll have to move one on in either, well, you're not going to move on Silvetti. And so if you're not moving on Telasco Segovia, which we'll see, but I would imagine we would be hearing things about that if that was about to happen right now. So I kind of think we're going to keep Telasco. And then Toto Aviles, I guess my point is you have to move Aviles before you can bring in a third one. Date-wise, it doesn't have to matter, but you have to make sure you have a plan to move on Aviles if you're going to do that. And so we'll see what ends up happening. But I do think this is a kid to watch out for and super talented. I'd love to bring him in. And then the other option I should mention is they could go to a 4+2 format. Instead of having 3 DPs, they could have 2 DPs plus 4 U22 DPs, at least until the summer, for example. And so something to keep an eye on, or at least to keep in the back of your head. If they go through January, especially if they get through January and they don't have another DP, they don't find a player they think is worth a DP spot, especially as that window closes in January and European teams lock in their rosters for the rest of the season. Inter Miami might just say, let's go with 2 and then bring in a 4th U22 DP and go with the 2+4 setup that you can do in the MLS and get some extra allocation money that they can use in international roster slots. Like that's available to them. So something to keep in mind, but again, I think that's the type of decision that'll be made after the European transfer window closes at the end of January. Pepto says this season hope to see Mascherano improve with his player evaluation, rotation, and in-game management. Absolutely. I think, and we talked about a little bit over the last couple of weeks about Mascherano. Like I still think there's some things to keep an eye on that you want to see improve from Mascherano, who obviously ended the season on the highest of highs, and I think made some really bold decisions that I think we're all really impressed with. But was that it's 4 games, we have to make a decision here, or was it I'm a more experienced and confident and competitive manager than I was 12 months earlier? We'll have to find out. Kevin says maybe an MLS team will get him because he's free with no fee. I think it's about the price more than anything, and I think it's about the availability. Listen, he played at Lyon last year, right? And wasn't a superstar. And so I don't think there's any reason to think he's going to come to the MLS and be a superstar. Maybe he will be, but I don't think Inter Miami is going to go for that. Pepto says that I want him, but they want $4 million with 20% sellout and package his brother. Yikes. Well, the thing about any U22 DP is the price doesn't really matter because he's going to fill in that specific slot and it won't affect how you build the rest of the roster. So Kevin says you can have more U22s until the summer and you buy out Aviles in the summer. They're not going to buy out Aviles. They're going to sell him. Fez says they need to move out Aviles as soon as possible. He was literally responsible for 90% of defensive mistakes in 2024, 2025. That is hilarious and so wrong. I won't even get into it. Mascherano really used his common sense during the playoffs, says Ani. Pepto says, I still don't forgive Mascherano for rating Redondo as a starter. Unforgivable. Yeah. Okay, guys, we're going to end it there. I just want to end it with talking about Mikael again. This could be a superstar signing. I really believe that. I think there's a chance he's the best center back Inter Miami's ever had. And they have a purchase option so that if it really goes well, they should be able to bring him in as a non-DP moving forward. Like, I think this could be like a club-changing type of signing, really, for the defense. And you pair that with what they've done with Dane St. Clair and at right back and some of the moves they've already made. Like, I think they're having a great offseason so far. It is Saturday, January 3rd, as we're recording this. I think it's going to be a busy week in the transfer window for Inter Miami next week. I think they want to get another 2 players in by that January 11th date. And, of course, the whole month is going to be busy. They're going to have to sign another 5-6 players. But like, it's an exciting time, and I think they've had a great start. And I will again leave you with this. Andrew Wiebe, I said it at the beginning, but for those that didn't listen or for those that have gotten less excited as I've talked about other players over the last couple, last 30 minutes. Andrew Wiebe says, Micael is an elite recovery and 1v1 ability as a defender, giving Miami even more license to push numbers forward and play a high line. He's also wildly underrated as a passer and is naturally left-footed, so a unicorn basically. All this is well known. A lot of hype for Ache in those prime dynamo tiki-taka seasons, but Mikael was the best player on that team. He single-handedly changes the risk-reward calculation for a team that wants the ball. That's Andrew Wiebe, who covers the MLS for Apple TV and their MLS broadcasts and is going to watch those games on a regular basis and has for years. So I think, if you don't take my word for it, take his. This is a dynamite signing, and I really think Inter Miami could be building another super team. And I thought that was going to be really, really difficult given how many resources they had in 2025 that they won't have in 2026. But I think they're off to a great start. So we'll leave it there. And we'll see you again soon. Soar out in, I think, the Sudan, planting trees in the Saharan desert and saving the world and something like that. So hopefully he'll be back maybe Monday or Tuesday, or we'll be back sooner with some sort of brand new signing and exciting player to talk about. But until then, hope you guys have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you guys next time.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this, and have a wonderful day.